Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and today is Wednesday. It is Wednesday, the 19th of July, and we're getting ready for Parshas Devarim. So today is our first day that we're back here in the base medrash, and back here at Shul, and God willing, I'm sorry for the confusion today, that we're going to, moving forward, we'll be at noon, like what we had been. We were at 2:00 because of my schedule at the school this year, but with school behind us, we're moving back to 12, and we'll be back here at the show. We'll still keep this Zoom, and we'll keep the Zoom option available for anyone who's not able to make it. But here we go. Hey, Shelley, here's a sheet here we've got printed for you. And again, I'm sorry about the confusion with the timing today. All right, so I've got some sources that I'd like to share. If anyone's joining us on Zoom, we've got them up on the screen as well, and we've got printed copies here at the show. So it's Parshas Devarim this week, and I look forward. I want to share a couple of good sources with you. So here's our first one. We're going to be focusing this morning on the first. Look at that, about the first 6 psukim of this week's parsha. There's so much in there. So let's see the first 3 psukim. We're on page 1. Ela hadvarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael be'ever Yarden. These are the words. We're about to start this 5th book of the Chumash, and it's giving us this preface that these are the words of Moshe, that Moshe himself composed and that Moshe shared with all the Jews be'ever Yarden while we were still on the other side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan before crossing into Israel. Bamidbar, we were still in the wilderness, Barava Mul Suf, in the plain opposite the Red Sea, Bein Paran or Bein Tofel, Lavan, Chatzeros, Di Zahav. It names a whole bunch of places. Beis, Achadasar Yom Chorev. It was an 11-day trip from Chorev, which is Har Sinai, Derech Har Seir, if you were going the way from Har Seir, at Kadesh Barnea. So again, it's ironic. The Torah is telling us this was a trip that really should have taken them 11 days from Har Sinai, and they've been wandering for the last 38 years because of the sin of the spies. But this really was not a 40-year voyage. They only were taking that long because of the sin of the spies. But number 3, Pasuk Gimel, Vayi bar ba'im shana, and it was in the 40th year of having left Egypt. Ba'ashtei asar chodesh, in the 11th month. Ba'achad lachodesh, in the first of day of that month. Diber Moshe el bnei Yisrael, so that's the month of Iyar. So it says, I'm sorry, of Adar. The 11th month is the month of Adar, because the 12th is so here we go. 11th month is Chodesh on the first day of that month. Diber Moshe el bnei Yisrael kechol asher tziva Hashem aso aleim. So this is when Moshe repeats everything that we're about to hear. So this is how Sefer Devarim begins. Now, Sefer Devarim is basically the last will and testament. This is Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to Bnei Yisrael. I've seen a number of people ask this question, but this is the first time I saw it addressed in this manner. So let's see. This is from the Tosefes Bracha. We've been seeing this year. That's from the same author as the Torah T'mima. That's Rav Baruch HaLevi Epstein. And he raises a question, which is a very good question. He says as follows, Ela advarim asher diber Moshe. All of Sefer Devarim, this is this eloquent speech that Moshe Rabbeinu is making. This is his last will and testament. It's a very long speech, but that's what it is. So he says, Kafia mispar mehem shekol Sefer Devarim. If you take a look at the running of the entire book of Devarim, the 5th book of the Chumash, hine kemat rubo shel Sefer, almost the entirety of this book, mechil Devarav shel Moshe Yisrael. It's the speech. Very little of it is saying Hashem says to Moshe, okay, I need you to tell Bnei Yisrael this. This is all Moshe on his own initiative. He composed his words, and he's giving this very eloquent speech, his last will and testament to Klal Yisrael, to the Jewish people. Mayam Divrei Hayamim. Part of this is like he's recounting their history. V'sipurim, he's also telling over stories. Mikol Ma'aros, from all of the incidents. V'amekarim me'az yatzim Mitzrayim. Everything that happened from the time they left Egypt, he's recounting for them. U'mayam Divrei Musar. Part of it is words of rebuke, of chastisement. Udvarim kavushim. Some of it's pretty rough. Umido, some of it is he's talking about character refinement. V'derech eretz v'cheshbon hanefesh u'chadoma, and he's asking them to take an accounting of their lives and the decisions that they've made. It touches upon all of those things. V'akol ne'arach, and it all seems to have been composed b'safa tima u'brura, with a beautiful, eloquent speech, and it's very clear. U'betiv tam, and it was very well delivered. As if he's an expert speaker. This is someone who would be on the speaking circuit. He would be in the scholar in residence listings for all of the major organizations. And everyone seems to have accepted what he said. It entered into their hearts and into their souls. Moshe did an awesome job in Sefer Devarim. He's basically saying, if you look at it, that's what's going on. Why is that a problem? Well, let's remember, what did Moshe say? What did Moshe say about himself? When God calls upon Moshe at the Sinai, at the burning bush, and he says, you are going to be my spokesman. You're going to be the one to speak to Paro. Was Moshe, did he feel he was the one for this job? No. He says, I'm not a speaker. I've got a speech impediment. I've got all sorts of issues. So that's what he says in this next paragraph. Well, if he's at Sarach Lamar, so how, according to this, now that we see what Moshe is capable of at this last book of the Chumash, so how do we have to explain his reticence, his reluctance to get involved in this as a speaker when Hashem called upon him back in Parshas Shemos? So he says, if he's at Sarach Lamar, so what do you have to say? T'masha Amar Moshe la Hashem be'es sheshalach osol daber im Paro. That what did Moshe say to God when he was called upon to be his agent, to be sent to Paro? Lo ish devarim anochi. I am not a man of words. Ki kaved peh. I've got a speech impediment. Kaved lashon. I've got a heavy mouth, a heavy tongue. Anochi. He's saying he's got all sorts of speech problems. Where's your speech problems, Moshe? You're doing a fine job. So how do we understand this? He says, Haisa kavana. So he says his theory is, well, what did Moshe mean? Rak biyechas hadibor el melchus sarim. He says, when it comes to the eloquence that's needed to speak to a king and to officers, to go to a king's court, to speak to nobility, that demands an entire different level of eloquence. Really, Moshe could give a good drasha. When he said to God, I've got a speech impediment, he didn't mean that he was not capable of speaking to the tzibor, to the congregation. He's doing a fine job of that in Devarim. What Moshe was saying was, as good of a speaker as I am, and I could get up in shul and give a drasha, I could get up to the Jewish people and speak to them, it's a different craft to be able to put one's words together and to be eloquent and to be a speechwriter, to be succinct and to find the right words that are necessary when you're speaking to a king and to nobility. You have to weigh every word. It takes an incredible amount of calculation. Think about all the speechwriters that are employed by heads of state. It's even beyond being a good speaker. There's a lot of chachma, a lot of wisdom that goes into it. And it must be, that's what Moshe was saying. That's what he's saying I'm not all that good at. Asher lazeh darosh kishron miyuchad, that demands an entirely different set of skills, of intelligence. Tchuna miyuchad, it's a whole different skill set. David said about himself, David said, I happen to have been blessed. God blessed me with that skill. Vamar, what did David say about himself in Tehillim? I was granted the ability to find the right words that I could go in front of kings and I could deliver an eloquent speech. Shlomo, and what about Shlomo Melech? He also said God blessed him with that. He said in Mishlei, he praiseworthy is the person who could stand before kings and find the right words. It's a real skill. So what do we see from what David praised himself and what Shlomo praises in Mishlei? Shelo davar kalu, that's not a simple matter. Not everybody has that skill. So that's what he's saying. That must be how to understand Moshe. Moshe in Sefer Shemos, he tells God that I'm the wrong man for the job. I lack those speech skills. What do you mean? Look what's going on in Parshas Devarim, Sefer Devarim. So he says, so must be. What did Moshe mean when he said I lack those skills? He was a fine speaker, but it's a whole different story to be a statesman and to be standing before Congress, to be standing before nobility, to be standing before leaders of nations. That demands an entirely different level of skill. And Moshe was saying, that's what I'm lacking. If you want me to give drashas, I'm fine with that. But now you're telling me to go to Paro? Whoa, I'm not ready for that. Now, Sefer Devarim is not standing before kings. It's not pleading the case before the UN. This instead is standing before Klal Yisrael. That's not a hostile audience. That's its people. They want to know the Torah, and he can deliver drashas. That Moshe is capable of. That's the way that the Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein wants to resolve this. It's really a question that demands resolution. And I think I remember the first time somebody even brought this problem to my attention. I was married. The last couple of years I was in yeshiva. I was in Kollel when we were living in New York. So I was taking a course that was being offered through the National Council of Young Israel and National Council of Young Israel and Touro College, and it was meant for fellows who are leaving yeshiva, were planning or looking into becoming shul rabbis. And they brought it went over the course of a year. I remember I would take a ride with some other guys. We would go to Brooklyn once a week for this, and I loved it. It was fascinating. They would bring in different seasoned shul rabbis to basically speak about different areas of Rabbanus, different areas of the rabbinate, and talk about what that was like. And just to open our eyes as to, wow, well, what's involved in this? What's involved in that? This aspect, this aspect. Some of them give practical skills. I remember one of them, it's so interesting. Obviously, there's no way you can become an expert after it, but it opens your eyes as to what to expect. And it makes you a little bit more receptive to what some of the issues may be, what you need to read up more about, who you need to speak to, establish some context. But there's one thing I'll never forget. There was a rabbi, I think his last name was Rabbi Wasserman, who had lived for years in Passaic, New Jersey. He since then has retired and lives in Israel. And I think his name is Rabbi Chaim Wasserman. And he lives in Israel now. And he was brought in one week to speak about a synagogue rabbi's role in conducting weddings. And he was basically going through the process of what goes on. We've all been to weddings, but if you don't take the time to really study the mechanics of what's going on in different parts. So he was talking about that, but he was also talking about how to run it smooth, how to run it that there won't be tircha de tzibur, there won't be unnecessary delays. He was giving a lot of practical hints. And one of the practical hints he gave that made such an impression on me was he had a video. It was comical. He brought in a video he had made over the years, almost like some smooth activities that he saw that were really good tips that he picked up, and others that were some serious mishaps that he was telling us how to avoid. And one of the ones he brought up on a mishap was he brought up a picture. He goes, "Who sees what's wrong in this picture?" What's wrong in that picture? It's a picture that's going on before at the Chassan's Tish when they're filling out, the officiating rabbi is making sure that the ksuva is all filled out. He's getting the signatures of the people, and then he's filling out the tanaim. And it's pictures of this. No one spots anything. And he says, "Okay," he goes, "You all didn't spot it. I'm going to show you what's wrong." He says, "How much money do you think this family spent on making this wedding?" We said, "We got no idea." So he goes, "Would you venture to say it was several $1,000s?" We said, "Yeah, definitely." He says, "They had to rent the hall. There's a caterer, there's a band, there's photographers, right?" "Yeah." He says, "And they're all going to have an album, right? Everyone has a wedding album, right?" "Yes." "And this wedding album, this is going to be in their living room. It might be hanging on their walls. They paid a lot of money for that, right?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Look at what the rabbi's holding." And he zooms in, and he's got a 10-cent Bic pen that's got bite marks on it. And he says, what a busha, what a busha. Everyone's there in suits. Some of the pictures he had, the groom was wearing a tux. He says, "Look at this, the family, this is their big day. The Chassan Kala, forget the money that's being spent. This is their big day. And what's going on? At the big day, this moment, the ksuva is being signed, the Tanakh is being signed. The rabbi is using a cheap Bic pen with bite marks in it. That's awful, and that's going to be ensconced forever in their wedding album." He says, "I'm begging you, leave here today. Stop at Office Depot, stop at Walgreens, and buy yourself a Parker pen. Get a nice stainless steel Parker pen. That should be item number one that every rabbi has in his pocket, a Parker pen. So when you are called upon and they're taking pictures, you will not be memorialized for having a chewed up big pen with bite marks in it." And I remember it made such an impression on me on my way back. I don't know if I did it on that night on my way back to Queens, but very shortly thereafter, I stopped into an Office Depot or I went on to, ordered online, just a stainless steel Parker, pen and pencil set. And I've been carrying it ever since. And that's what I've got ever since there. I've been through a couple of them since then. Not all they don't. It's not the original. They don't always survive, but I've been through it. It made such an impression on me. But that made such an impression. But again, during that course, one of the rabbis who spoke raised this question. And he raised this question. He was talking about, I don't remember the subject that this rabbi was brought in to speak about, what the overall arching lesson of what area of the rabbinate he was going to talk about. But in the course of his talk, he brought up this question. How do you reconcile the fact that Moshe in Sefer Shmos says that he's not a man of words, and also the whole Sefer Devarim is so eloquent? And he gave an answer that was such a novel answer. It made such an impression on me. I've given this to a couple people, but I never was able to find a source for it until this past year. So let's go to page 2, and we're going to go to page 2. You'll see it's a completely different topic, but you'll see how this ties in. So this was just a couple of months ago, maybe even a couple of weeks ago. One of the rabbinic email groups I belong to, there was a rabbi on there who said someone sent him, one of the people that he was studying with. This was an outreach email group. So it was a Jew who had a very limited background who had sent him the following question. It was basically asking, what do we need a third temple for? It's in our prayers. We keep davening for a third temple. How can you make it real to me? So here was the question. I've got it italicized. He writes as follows, this rabbi: just got this question from a friend and wanted to know if anyone had any sources that discusses this topic, specifically addressing this angle. Why do we need a third Beit HaMikdash? I know we want it, but the question is why we need it. Hashem can reside anywhere. He can bring the Mashiach if he wants to. He can redeem the world regardless of the presence of a building on the Temple Mount if he so chooses. Much of the temple service has been replaced by our daily practice, that many of those have been rendered unnecessary. We have a Jewish nation. We have returned to Zion. Trust me, I'd much prefer not having a mosque on our holy sites, but why is it necessary that we need a physical third temple as opposed to what a third temple might represent? That was a very thoughtful question he had received from someone, which I think at some points we're all going to receive that question from someone we know, and we may even be thinking it ourselves. So here's what I responded to the group. I said, excellent question. I once heard a rabbi offer the following approach. The concept of korbanos, right, the sacrifices that are brought, the offerings, does not resonate with a non-observant Jew. In contemporary times, it just doesn't resonate. And to be absolutely honest, despite the fact that we daven for the restoration of korbanos each day, it's difficult for it to resonate with us contemporary Orthodox Jews as well. Even though we're davening for it, it's hard because we're growing up in a world without a Beis HaMikdash. We seem to be getting along fine, and we found other avenues for our spiritual pursuits. It's hard for us to relate to as well. This is because we've never known a world that had korbanos. So it's very difficult for us to feel that something is missing right now. So he suggested we focus on healing. Everybody knows someone who is sick and is in great need of healing. There are psukim in Yeshayahu and Isaiah which indicate that in the times of Mashiach, humanity will be healed from all its sickness. Perhaps that creates something which is 100% tangible for a questioning Jew and the rest of us to daven fervently for. So meaning as follows: it might be hard to explain to someone, we need Mashiach come because we need the third Beis HaMikdash to be built because we need to have korbanos. Well, what do I need that for? So here's a totally different angle. Forget about korbanos right now. Doesn't everyone know someone who's ill? Doesn't everyone have someone in your family they care about who needs refuah shalema? So there are indications from Yeshayahu, from the Nevi'im, when they speak about the Messianic era, that the world will be healed. So isn't that tangible? So when I'm davening for Mashiach, I'm davening for the restoration of the Davidic dynasty, that's something very tangible I can focus on. It's hard for me to feel that I'm missing something because I don't have korbanos, but I can feel that I'm missing having refuah. I know people who are ill who need a refuah. So I wrote here a long story, but the other week I was looking into the piyut of Divai Haser that's recited before Birchas Hamazon at Sheva Brachas. And I have it there. The first two lines say, Divai Haser v'gam charon, v'azi leim b'shir yaron. And I have it there on the bottom in English. What does that translate into? Banish illness and also anger. And then the mute will sing with joy. Steer us on the right paths. That's Nechenu b'magleit tzedek, she'ei birkas b'nei Aaron. Guide the blessing of Aaron's son. But look at the first lines. Devaya ser v'gam charon. Banish illness and also anger. V'az ilein b'shir yaron. And then the mute will sing with joy. We seem to be talking about a time that God's going to make these miracles, that illness is gone, anger is gone, and people who were mute didn't have the ability to sing, to speak. And here, they're going to sing with joy. Those are based on psukim in Yeshayahu. They're actually on the next page on the top. If you want to just skip there for a second, look at those psukim in Yeshayahu when he's describing the Messianic era. He writes, Az tipachna einei ivrim. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then the lame shall skip like a hart, like a deer. Piseach v'saron lashoni lame, and the tongue of the mute shall sing. For water is broken out in the desert and streams in the plain. So it's a very poetic way that Yeshayahu Hanavi is describing the Messianic era, and it seems very clear that this Devai Haser, those first two lines, are based on those psukim. When Yeshayahu is describing about everyone being healed and everything, it sounds like this is a piyut that when we're at a Sheva Brachas, we're asking Hashem to bring that Messianic vision that Yeshayahu described, bring it to reality by bringing Mashiach. So just to conclude this, the plain meaning of the psukim is that Yeshayahu's prophecy is that Yeshayahu's prophecy. Oh, I wrote that twice. In Yeshayahu's prophecy is that in the Yemos HaMashiach, in the Messianic era, all physical infirmities will be healed. That's what the plain meaning is. Some of the Meforshim, some of the commentaries, however, say it's a metaphor. But the plain meaning is right there. I found that to be quite helpful. All the best they have. So that's what I was saying. If someone is ever questioning us, so if we ourselves are ever wondering, what do I need the Beis HaMikdash for? So we all know that there's a reason for it, but it's hard for us to put it into words. It's hard for us to feel because we never knew. If we knew what the world was like when we had a Beis HaMikdash and what God's presence being in this world, how that makes our world so much more special, then we would clearly say, okay, we need that back. But it's hard for us to know because we never knew that. So what can I look at? Why do I want the Mashiach to come so badly? Because I want to say, well, for refuah, we all know people who are ill, and that's something tangible. That's what this rabbi was saying. So I said this, okay, I suggested this to him. If someone ever asks us about Mashiach, this is a great angle to take. Why did I hear a rabbi talk about this? So this gets back to that Young Israel Turo course, is that what happened was he wanted to present the following idea. He said, have you ever had someone ask this question about karbanos? What do we need this for? Why do we need the Beis HaMikdash rebuilt? We need karbanos. God needs our sheep. So he says, this is the angle I take. I take this angle about the healing. He was saying this. He didn't bring us the proof from the Psukim and Yeshayahu. I only found this within the last year that it made it sit better with me. But listen to this, what he did say. He said as follows. He says, and here's a thought I have on this. Did you ever wonder that in Sefer Shemos, Moshe is saying, I've got these speech problems. And yet in Sefer Devarim, he's so eloquent. He's got this whole soliloquy that he's giving. What changed? How do we reconcile this? What changed? So here was his suggestion. So it's probably the same question as the Torah T'milah. Here was his suggestion. Again, he didn't have a proof for it because it's his theory. Something drastically happened in between Sefer Shemos and Devarim. Matan Torah happened. And at Matan Torah, what does the Chazal say? Chazal say at Matan Torah that something incredible happened, was that it said that everyone who was everyone was able to see, everyone was able to hear, everyone was able to stand, because these are expressions that it's talking about at Matan Torah, that the whole nation stood, the whole nation saw, the whole nation heard. So Rashi there quotes Chazal that say, what does that mean? There were people who were lame, there were people who were ill, there were people who couldn't see, there were people who were blind, there were people who were deaf. So it says being exposed to the Shekhinah, having that close encounter with the divine, having that close encounter healed everyone from all their illness. So everyone, there was no one, who wasn't able to see beforehand, who was stuck with that, they could see. Anyone who wasn't able to hear could all of a sudden hear, and everyone who couldn't walk could walk. So everyone was healed. Now, again, any man between over the age of 20 died in the wilderness, except who was still around at this point? Was Moshe. So he wanted to say, this was his suggestion. If everyone who was blind, deaf, and lame was healed, Moshe was also healed because that massive close encounter with the divine that happened at Har Sinai. And that's why Moshe, come Sefer Devarim, he's able to give this massive eloquent speech because he was healed at Matan Torah for whatever ailments he had, whatever that speech impediments were, he was healed. And that's how that was this rabbi, again, that was his suggestion here, which again does make a lot of sense because again Rashi does say that at Matan Torah people were healed. Now my only problem I had with that is I could say, okay, well that was so he wanted to say that same token when the Shekhinah returns, when the third Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, we can hope for that again. My question on that is that okay, Matan Torah was a one-time event. If everyone gets healed when the Shekhinah was around, then that would mean during the first Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, when God's presence was totally there, are you going to tell me there were no blind Jews? There were no deaf Jews? There were no lame Jews? I'm not familiar with that. Here Yeshayahu is telling us in the Messianic age, there's going to be this incredible healing that takes place. But I'm not aware of the fact that during the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, that everyone Shlomo HaMelech dedicated and all of a sudden everyone was healed. So I don't know. That was the thing. So I thought it was a very interesting suggestion this rabbi had, but I think we could definitely say it, pinning it on Yeshayahu's prophecy of what we can hope for in the time of Mashiach. I'm just not aware that it happened outside of Matan Torah. Yeah.
And Why wasn't Moshe healed the first time he encountered the Shekhinah?
Oh, because I think it was much more intense, Matan Torah. That was when this like healing was given, dispensed to all of Bnei Yisrael. There sounds like that was this incredible close encounter with the Shekhinah. All of Bnei Yisrael is healed. So that was his suggestion. Again, this was his suggestion. I personally, again, I had a question on this because then you'd say if that's true and that's what you're hoping for in the third base to make this, then why wasn't the first? But going away from there, from Yeshayahu, you clearly see Yeshayahu, the plain meaning of the text in Yeshayahu's prophecy is that in the time of the Mashiach, the world is going to experience this incredible healing. So I think we can still say that idea but again, I wouldn't apply that to Moshe, that he went through this. That was what this rabbi was suggesting. I just had a question on it. But in terms of being able to answer, what is it, make it tangible for me to pray for the Messianic age? These psukim from Yeshayahu make it very, very tangible, because we all know people who need a refuah shalema, and that's all right. That's the first point I wanted to discuss. I want to bring up now a second point. Here's the second point that a friend of mine in yeshiva pointed out to me years ago, and every time I see this Rashi, it continues to make this impression on me. So the third pasuk in the parsha says that Moshe waited till the 40th year, till they're about to enter Israel, till he's about to die, till he gives them this speech. So Rashi there is going on the pasuk that says Vayihi bar ba'im shana. It was in the 40. We're on page 3, the second source there. It says Rashi to Devarim 1:3. Vayihi bar ba'im shana was in the 40th year. B'ashtei asar chodesh, in the 11th month. Chodesh. Be'echad l'chodesh, on the first day of that month. Melamed. So Rashi's quoting the Medrash. It says Melamed. This teaches us. So Shelo Hochichan, that Moshe did not rebuke them elasamach lamisa, until he was close to passing away, meaning he didn't take opportunities earlier in his life to start rebuking Bnei Yisrael, because some of what he's going to say at the beginning of this parsha are words of rebuke. He's telling them off about what they did wrong. Mimi Lamad, who did Moshe learn this from? That it's wisest to wait until close to death, when people might be closer to you, to offer rebuke. Mimi Lamad, who did Moshe learn this from? Yaakov. He learned it from Yaakov Avinu. Shlo hochiach es banav elasamach lamisa. Yaakov in Parshas Vayechi, when he's offering his last words to the 12 Shvatim, he also offered some words of rebuke, specifically to Shimon, to Levi. He offered to Reuven also. He offered some words of rebuke. Yet what did he do? He waited till he was nearly dead. He waited till he was on his deathbed in Parshas Vayechi. So the question is, why did Yaakov wait so long? So he writes as follows: Amar, Yaakov's calculation was as follows: Reuven b'ni, as far as my son Reuven, because he's the first one I'm going to tell off. He says pachas kamayim, that he was impetuous. So he says Reuven b'ni, ani omer lecha mipnei ma lo hochachticha kol hashanim halalu. Why did I not rebuke you all these years? You moved the beds around so many years prior. Why did Yaakov wait till he was almost dead to rebuke you, Reuven? Today, because he wanted to wait till Reuven would be close to him, and Reuven was in a situation shelo tanicheni, that he would not leave me, v'telech v'tibach be'esav achi, and go cling to my brother Esav. People are so delicate. We are so delicate. We often think we're so much more macho than we are. We are so fragile. And oftentimes people will say to me, well, why don't you say something to that guy? Why don't you say something to that person? Tell him off. And I think it usually doesn't go well. Most people, I know, I don't like it. I don't think anyone really likes being told off. It doesn't go well. And Yaakov is so worried about his son Reuven that if he criticizes him, what's Reuven going to do? He's going to say, I can't take this anymore. I'm leaving. I'm going hanging out with Uncle Esav. I'm pitching my tent with Uncle Esav. I'm joining his camp. Now, there was a world of a difference between Esav and Yaakov and Reuven. You would assume it's on Team Yaakov. All it's going to take, and what did Yaakov say already that was so harsh? He criticized him. You're impetuous and you got to take time and before you jump into action. It's not even so harsh. He didn't take out the ruler and start smacking his knuckles or anything. Like it was, but he was telling him off. He was being critical of him. Humans, the answer is humans don't respond, generally don't respond well to criticism. And if we criticize someone in the wrong way, we don't do it right, we don't find them at the right time when we offer those words of criticism, we can totally push that person away. So we got to be really, really careful and choose our words extremely wisely, and not just our words, but find the right time, the right place, the right set of circumstances till we offer any kinds of words of criticism. Because here's Yaakov worried that if he would have offered it at the wrong time, he would have basically pushed Reuven out, and Reuven would have joined camps with Esau. That's phenomenal, and I think it gives each and every one of us pause, because I think our natural reaction is when we see someone do something we don't approve of, our natural reaction is to tell them off. I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. That's our natural reaction. And this Rashi reminds us, whoa, cool the jets. It doesn't go over well. And criticism isn't always taken so well. So really, really give the matter careful thought. Find the right time, the right place, and the right words. Don't be hasty to do it. If Yaakov had what to be worried about, I think we all have what to be worried about. Just happened to me today, in fact. I was speaking to a friend this morning, and just recently, our high school class, we just had our 31st anniversary of our high school. We graduated high school in 1992. I have no idea where the time went, but it's now the summer of 2023. And one of the guys in the class decided, you know what, just about everyone has WhatsApp. Why don't we make a chat where, this way people could, someone had just lost a parent that was sitting Shiva, others didn't even know about it, and people hadn't been in touch. And all this time, there's people who haven't spoken in 30 years. So they hunted down, got as many numbers, found just about everyone. There's still a couple that we haven't discovered yet. And there's about 25 guys on this chat. And it's going around. And then someone was after me saying, I somewhere in a closet, I have a box with 4 photo albums. Remember those old school photo albums where you had to peel back the plastic? It was like an adhesive behind it. So I had 4 photo albums that were made during high school, pretty much one per school year, just, documenting. You don't even think of it at the time, walking around with a camera, just documenting what's going on in the hallways on different school trips or whatnot. And they were asking me, can you upload those? I said, I'm not going to start taking them out. It's too much. So I said, we basically started with Daf Yomi. Okay, so one day is every day, just take a picture with your iPhone of both sides of one page of that album. You guys could zoom on it. So I've been doing that for like the last week or two. So someone just this morning, reached out to me about something else. He called me and he said, I was noticing there's one fellow that, the words he was using, something he was saying about someone just weren't 100% right. You have a good relationship with him. Can you tell him that's got to stop? And I was like, not so sure that, again, you're just going to start calling and say, hey, you got to start, using, stuff like that takes a lot of work. You gotta redevelop that relationship, find the right time, find the right thing, say, okay, I think you got to speak a little bit more politely with the words you're using. It's not so simple. It's not, I was just thinking about this morning, and all of a sudden, here's that Rashi telling us it's not so simple, giving another person a piece of our mind. If we don't do it, find the right way to express it, we don't find the right time, the right place, the right venue, all these things, we could really risk pushing someone further away. And if that was true, if that was Yaakov's concern about Reuven, I think that speaks to each and every one of us about how we've got to really be careful before we just act out of impulse and reflex and just start criticizing people and giving them a piece of our mind. Now, to build on this Rashi, a friend of mine, a different friend of mine, this is, I've quoted him before, Rabbi Shimon Feder. He lives in Florida. The other year, he put out a very fascinating book. It was on the Parsha. It's called Psychology and Personal Growth in the Torah. So it's practical lessons from the Rishonim that he basically goes through the Parsha, and on every part, he runs a Jewish outreach center in Boca Raton in Florida. So it sounds like the genesis of this book is that people that he learns with, every week he would make a Divrei Torah, put together a Divrei Torah that was really using very carefully, analyzing the words of some of our commentaries and come up with a practical lesson from it. So I have it if you like to see if you need to write down which one it is. So I've been looking through it this year, and I found some beautiful Divrei Torah in there. So I actually saw this in there, and I was in touch with him this week. I said, you quoted a source. I've never seen that source before. What is it? I wanted to look it up in its original, and that's what we're going to see here. So this Maharik, he's known by his acronym, the Maharik. You see there, I got a Wikipedia, just a brief bio. His name was Rabbi Yosef Kolon ben Shlomo, and he was also known as Maharik, because Maharik would be Marenu Harav, Yosef, and then the Kuf is Kolon. So again, he was from Italy. He was a 15th century rabbi. So he was living in the 1400s in Italy. and he was considered Italy's foremost Judaic scholar and Talmudist of his era. So he was one of the great Italian Rishonim. I'm really not all that familiar with him, but that is who the Maharik was. And apparently, his students put together, this is from the title page, Chidushe Perushe Maharik, Ala Torah, Rambam, and the Smag, from Rabbeinu Yosef, Kolon, V'Talmidav. So there's a sefer that's out there that his students put together, and some of it is on the Torah, on the Parsha, and occasionally he'll comment on Rashi. So here's someone in the 1400s, he's still a Rishon, he's a very early commentator on Rashi. So I was totally unaware of this until this week when I saw this in his sefer. So I was in touch with him. I said, where is it? So he showed me where to find it. I found it online on one of the online libraries I belong to. So let's look what he does. He wants to understand this Rashi. And he says as follows, Pirish Rashi, She Yaakov Amar LeRuven, Yaakov told Reuven, why did I wait so long to criticize you? Bini, Amar Lacha Mipnei Ma, why did I wait so long? So he says, why? Because I don't want him to go join forces with Esau. So here's the Marik. Tema, here's his question. Minale Rashi, where did Rashi get this from? Amar Yaakov Kulei, that Yaakov had this calculation. How does Rashi know this? Rashi says Yaakov was nervous that Reuven would have joined up with Esau. What indicates this? What possible? They're so worlds apart. Reuven he's one of the Shiftei Ka, he's one of the 12 righteous tribes. Esav he's a delinquent. He's an evil guy. He's up to no good. He's a bandit. He's this thief. He's this chieftain who's waging war. This is such a different character than Reuven. Where did Rashi get this from? That Yaakov had reason to fear that Reuven was going to leave his side and go to Esau. So look what he says. Va'omer Maharik, so this is the student's writing. So the Maharik said, you know where Rashi got this from? Yaakov LeRuven. What was Yaakov's message to Reuven? Yaakov was saying to Reuven, he was explaining to him, Shafsid B'choraso, you know why you lost your birthright? Why it's really going to be given to Yosef? You know why you lost your birthright? Al Shisarach Lekalkel Yitzua. You had the chutzpah to start rearranging the beds. Bivadai Haya Yarei. Once he said to him, there's a consequence. It's not just a criticism that you're saying you're impetuous, but he said, I also took away your birthright. And now he knows that Reuven might be upset he took away his birthright. Who else in Jewish history in the not so distant past had his birthright taken from him and was pretty upset? Esav. Shema Yudavik Be'esav. That's why he's nervous if he's looking for someone who also has this gripe. Who else is upset about losing a birthright? Now maybe he'll find misery loves company. Now he's going to find Esav. Shagam huaya ma'arer al b'chora shehifzeh. Esav was griping, he was all miserable, kicking the dirt, talking about his lost birthright. So now all of a sudden, misery loves company, they're going to join up. So my friend Shimon Feder, this was his point here. He says, isn't this incredible? They're different worlds. Reuven's interested in spirituality and growth. He's part of the Shiftei Ka. And Esav, he's a murderous chieftain. He's out to conquer territory. They have totally different interests in life. But misery loves company. He can feel my pain. He can understand what I'm going through. We've got a conversation. We've got something to talk about. We've got something in common. As soon as there's something in common to talk about, you could have people from completely different walks of life, completely different aspirations, but there's a commonality, there's a common denominator, something they share. Now Yaakov's worried, they're going to sit down over a beer and start schmoozing about this. I have no idea where this is going to go. Why? Because each and every one of us, we're looking for validation. If I'm upset about something and there's someone else in this world who might be able to say, I know what that's like and I can understand you, boom, that forges a union. And it can make the most unlikely people get together. That's what Yaakov is nervous about. But let's use that for good. All of us, we all keep our eyes and ears open. We have our antennas up. Any of us have had issues that we've gone through in life. There could have been challenges. There could have been something that we learned how to navigate. If we find somebody else who might be dealing with that same issue, and we could say to them, wow, I just heard that you're going through X, you're going through Y. Would you like to talk about that? I once had to deal with that. I know what that's like. I can tell you some of the lessons I learned along the way. I can tell you some of the coping mechanisms. I could tell you some things I have in my tool chest from that experience. We might because of that human need that we all have, and I'm looking for someone who could relate to what I'm going through, we might mean the world to somebody else that's out there. Yaakov was worried about this in the negative respect because of the fact that he knew this is human psychology, this is a human need. So now that Reuven has this and there's a common denominator between Esav could totally win him over. If we have our goals and our aspirations in the right place, and we reach out to somebody who we might be able to say, hey, I understand you're going through X. I once went through something somewhat similar. I could talk to you about it. And we could help them know that they're understood, help them know that someone is in their corner, someone who knows what they're going through, has something to offer. We could make an incredible connection. And that could mean the difference, complete difference in somebody else's outcome. So I love this idea. He's taking this. I love this Myrick. I love what my friend Rabbi Feder, what he did with this, and now we can use this for good. There's an expression that's out there called Saras Rabim Chatzi Nachama, which means knowing that other people have felt my pain that I'm experiencing. I'm not a loner. I'm not the only one in the world feeling this pain. That offers some degree of comfort. So Tsaras Rabim Chatzi Nachama means if another person lets me know, if I find out that somebody else has been through this challenge, that offers me some comfort. If I've been through some challenge, I could offer someone some comfort, just letting them know they're not alone. Others have experienced this. That could be comforting to them. But also more than that, I can forge a relationship, seeing what the Marik just said here, and that could really help someone get over the hurdles they face and really propel them to do good. I want to share one more quick thought with you. This one we'll just see outside because we're running short on time. But on page 4, there's a beautiful idea that I saw from the Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer, remember, was a son of the Chassam Sofer, so he's living in Hungary. And this is also right at the beginning of the Parsha. It says that at that stage, Be'er Ayardain, so it says on the east side of the Jordan, Eretz Moab, still in the land of Moab, Hoel Moshe commenced Be'er es haTorah azos lemor, and explained the law. It didn't say he said over. Be'er means he explained. So Rashi quotes the Gemara that says, what does it mean that Moshe explained it? He says, Be'er es haTorah b'shivim lashon Pershalem. He explained it to them in 70 languages. So different interpretations say different ideas of what that means. You'll see in the translation, Haksava Kabbalah, that's kind of he lived in the 1800s. His idea was he showed them there are 70 ways to interpret every verse. But the plain reading of this is that he said the Torah over to them in 70 languages, or he wrote it over for them in 70 languages. And the question is, who did he do that for? So some of the commentaries, the way the Gemara learns is that basically there was this massive set of stones that were set up right at the border where the Torah, it's a question of how much, was it the entire Torah or just the basic instructions for humanity, were given over into 70 languages. So all the nations of the world could come to the borders and see it in their language and say, okay, now I know what God's will is for humanity, and take that home with them. Again, not the mitzvahs that are unique to Klal Yisrael, but he could take it home with them. That's how the Gemara seems to understand this. But from Rashi saying here, quoting the Medrash and the Gemara, he says that Moshe said it over to them in 70 languages. The question is, what was the purpose of this? So again, according to the Gemara, it was for the nations of the world. That by putting it out there in 70 languages, giving the universal parts of the Torah in 70 languages, now the rest of humanity could come to the border and see what God's will is for them and what he wants from them, what kind of conduct. But the Ksav Sofer offers a nice drasha to this. He offers a very nice idea. And here's what he says. Moshe wanted to make it clear to Bnei Israel that the Torah was not given to them for this limited period in their lives, when they were in the wilderness, cut off from the rest of the world, or when you're going into Israel, and you'll also be in this hermetically sealed, right? I pronounced that correct? Hermetically sealed vacuum that the rest of the world, they might come there for business every now and then, and you may travel for business, but Bnei Israel has the ability to have its own borders and to create a Torah-based society. A Jew might make the mistake in thinking that's what the Torah was meant for. That's because that's when it was given to us, either in the Midbar, in the wilderness, when we had the Anani HaKavod surrounded, we were free from the rest of the world, or we were in Israel, we're independent from the rest of the world. But if it would ever happen in the future that we'd go into Galus, that we'd go into exile, and now we're living amongst the nations of the world, a Jew might come up with the idea to say, that's not for us anymore. The Torah, the mitzvahs, that was all meant for a specific time and purpose when we were living in Israel and we had complete independence. But now that we're not there, it's not meant for us. So the Ksav Sofer wants to say, no, that's why Moshe gave it to us in 70 languages, to tell us the Torah is applicable to no matter where we find ourselves, no matter what the circumstances, no matter where in the world we find ourselves, no matter what nation we're ever living in. We find ourselves in Germany, here's one of the 70 languages. We find ourselves in England, here's one of the 70 languages. We find ourselves in Rome, here's one of the 70 languages. In Babylonia, here you go. To let us know that the expectation for every member of Klal Yisrael is that no matter where we find ourselves, no matter where we are, no matter what time, no matter what the circumstances are, we're still meant, God's plan is for us to still observe the Torah. This is a nice drush that the Ksav Sofer has, and you have to also just put this into context. He's living at a time where they were really fighting the reform movement. So there they are in Hungary. He's a son of the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer was very well known as someone who was really trying to set his community up in Hungary and in much of Western Europe up with the foundations it needed to resist the temptation of assimilation. The ghetto walls have come down. Opportunities are out there. There are people saying it's time to become a citizen of the world. This idea of the Torah, it's keeping you from becoming one and part of the brotherhood of man. You know, this was an idea that's speaking exactly to his generation. That he's saying, no, that's why the Torah was given to us. Moshe's taught it to us in 70 languages to tell us no matter where we find ourselves, no matter what opportunities are out there, no matter what language is being spoken, we're still going to observe the Torah. Our lives are meant to live by the Torah. That's what this Ksav Sofer is saying. I thought it's a beautiful idea, but I think it really is understood when we know the context of his time, where he was living, when he was living, and the challenges that he was facing, and that he was trying to embolden his community to be able to face as well. So those are the Divrei Torah that I wanted to share this week. I'm going to